Dear colleagues, I got the hardest task, to get everyone back after lunch. So first of all, I truly hope that now we will be able to involve all our participants of the panel, but I would like to thank you straight away, those who came on time. First of all, Katerina Borisovna Levchenko, please come to the stage. Also, I would like to invite Lyudmila Hoseinova, please. So, also colleagues, among other participants of our panel, we are having partially online speeches, so we will just see, and when people will join, we will involve them to our panel. Meanwhile, I'm inviting to participation also Chantal is online. I'm sorry, Esther Dintuminis, also online. Okay, sorry. Okay, Kim Tessilinger, please, I invite you. Then, and also representatives from Japan, that is Deputy Head of the Mission, Mr. Yasumoto Ijima. Thank you very much for joining us. I see that we don't have one more person. Thank you very much for... Yeah, okay. Let us begin. And still another speaker has to join us. Not everybody has returned from lunch. That is what I said, that it's a challenge. However, in order for us to be able to start our panel, if you allow me, I would like to briefly just introduce us to the context. Why did we dedicate such people decided to talk about the Global Alliance? Because first of all, I would like to remind you how in general the creation of Alliance was conducted. I remember that perfectly. Together with Ms. Katerina, we were in November 2022 in Great Britain at the conference dedicated to sexual violence during conflict. And on this conference, of course, Ukraine was in the center of attention. In the center of attention were all those scary stories of crimes of sexual violence committed by Russian militaries against civil population of Ukraine during the full-scale invasion. And it is on this conference, the initiative from Lord Ahmad Wimbledon was mentioned to create such an alliance. International, both organizations and countries who would jointly start acting in order to maximize all the efforts and efficiency of these efforts in helping the survivors, and of course, in order to implement the best practices of reparation payments, compensations, and not only compensations, but also other measures. And as a result of the work, literally like less than in half a year in New York, already there was the first meeting where this alliance had started. And at the moment, from Great Britain, it was headed by Lord Ahmad, and also from Ukraine, that was Deputy Head Olha Stefanishina, Vice Prime Minister on European Integration, as well as representative from Colombia, Ministry of Interregional Relations. So thus, we underlined from one side the initiative founded by Great Britain, and we are incredibly grateful to them for that. And also, we underline the meaning of unfortunately horrible experience of Ukraine and Colombia. Today, we are going to talk about what happened after this alliance has been founded and how, as of today, the countries are cooperating. The participants of non-state level are cooperating in this alliance. And what are the future plans, ambitions, and what is the role of the country in all of that. I think that it is very important and unprecedented that actually, for the first time after this inauguration meeting, we have this very international panel where different countries, participants of this alliance, will be able to present their positions. But before we start our offline discussion, I would like to ask to include words from the head of the alliance, the representative of Great Britain, Lord Ahmad, because we came to him with a question: how did he see the work of the alliance and priorities of his central role in creating policies, decisions for survivors? So please, attention to the screen.
To speak today, and I'm truly sorry that I cannot join you in person. But before I turn to your excellent question, allow me to pay specific tribute to Ukraine's incredible response to the shocking and appalling acts of sexual violence being perpetrated as part of Russia's brutal war on Ukraine. The commitment I've seen directly through conversations, through meetings, and on the ground of our Ukrainian colleagues, and the incredible courage demonstrated by ordinary citizens in Ukraine in the most challenging of circumstances are frankly, truly inspiring. Let me assure you of this, that the United Kingdom has, is, and will continue to support you, including through the Office of the Prosecutor General, to secure accountability, accountability for the perpetrators, and importantly, justice for survivors. Now, let me turn to your question. The needs and voices of survivors are very much, as many of you know, at the heart of our approach, the UK's approach to preventing sexual violence in conflict. 5 years ago, I appointed the UK's survivor champions, who've done an incredible job on the advice they offer me, the insights they offer me, but also in policy planning and programming. And those champions, Nadine Tanasi and Kolobasia Hasu, they are, to put quite straightforwardly, vital advocates. They play an integral part in establishing our survivor advisory group 2 years ago to shape the government's thinking, our policy making. As you've already mentioned, we established the International Alliance with partners around the world. And in doing so, when I made that call and made that announcement, yes, it was a proud moment, but it was also inspirational to see how many countries joined that call, including, importantly, Ukraine as well. Because this alliance will drive global action, and most importantly, it will amplify the voices of survivors, putting it at the heart of international policy. During the first high-level meeting last year, the alliance was inspired by the recommendations presented by the Survivor Advisory Group. And I'm truly delighted that Colombia have taken over as chair this year. And we're taking robust steps to engage survivors in the work of the alliance in the year ahead. We also look forward to supporting their efforts as a vice chair. And I'm absolutely determined that this alliance will continue to play an important role in championing new survivor-centered approaches, strengthening support, and crucially and vitally ensuring that survivors can meaningfully engage in decisions affecting them, and we bring perpetrators to justice. Collaboration with survivor networks, community-led initiatives, and non-governmental organizations are vital to help shape and inform our approaches, policies, programs, and what we deliver on the ground. We have so much to learn from these incredible, courageous survivors on important issues, including those of redress. But it's also through meaningful engagement with survivors that they can access the justice that is so meaningful to them, to receive the practical support they need, to importantly start rebuilding their lives. Therefore, I look forward to our future work together, driving international efforts to achieve these goals. And in doing so, may I finally say this: I truly wish you the best for this conference, which I'm sure will galvanize those efforts and make sure that survivors are at the heart of our international approach. Thank you so much.
Дякуємо.
Thank you very much, Lord Ahmed. Thank you very much to Great Britain for their support. And actually, that is a country which is constantly setting up the highest level in any policies on supporting Ukraine, and we are sincerely grateful for that. Now, switching to the things mentioned by Lord Ahmed right now about that we would like to somehow use, in a good sense, of course, the practice of global alliance in order to just have the support and to maximize the support and to use that to the maximum, including for the survivors in Ukraine. Tell us, please, Katerina Borisivna, Government Commissioner on Gender Policy and our head of Interagency Working Group on Prevention of Sexual Violence related to armed aggression of Russia against Ukraine, the person who has a very, I would say, incredible and unique experience, like to combine state and non-governmental organizations, international organizations for many, not even months, but years. You are like standing and you are kind of the head of those unique initiatives and policies of Ukraine. Your experience, well, first of all, how would you assess appearance of this global alliance and indeed how that is helpful today for this coordination, cooperation among totally different stakeholders, and how do you see the role of Ukraine in this global alliance? What are our ambitions for the next years? And if we still have some time, maybe very briefly about that unique pilot project that was mentioned today by Ms. Stefanishina in terms of these best practices, you know? How do you assess that and what can Ukraine offer to global alliance? Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Elena. Hello, dear colleagues. Just like other speakers, I have to say that indeed it's a big honor to participate in this conference, and I am really grateful to you for the interest that you are showing not only to the meeting today, but also to work with some practical things that you do every day on your position. Today, talking about those achievements that we have in Ukraine and about those some problematic issues or issues of prospects, of course, we always try to see the experience, to look at the experience that other countries have.
The Global Alliance here is a unique union, a unique association platform that gives an opportunity to discuss ideas, to discuss initiatives, in order for policies of combating CRSV would be effective. I participated in a conference in London when this alliance was initiated. And I remember the main motive of the entire conference was the need to listen to the voices of those who were affected, consult with those people, and form policies together with them. Listening to the respectable speakers, I myself asked the question, how do we do that? As a government commissioner and as the head of the interagency working group at the time, I completely understood and understand the need for such consultations. But I approached every single person with a question, how do we organize that? Who can help us? And it turned out that it was members of the Global Alliance who could help us, and Dr. Mukwege Foundation, and the Global Fund for Survivors. They have this experience And they are already implementing this advisory process now with our dear colleagues, with dear friends who are with us today, those who were affected by CRSV. And this is part of cooperation between the Ukrainian government and these two organizations. When we signed a memorandum of cooperation, we actually included the need for such consultations on the memorandum. The Global Alliance is also a community of like-minded people, and that's very important for us, because I would hope that more and more countries in the world would join this organization. And using this opportunity, using the fact that we have people with us who are representatives of countries that are not represented in the alliance yet, I would urge you to join. Its members are also some structures and organizations within the UN. So this is a union of countries, organizations, both national and non-governmental. Ukraine actually, I wouldn't say without thinking, but without hesitation, it joined the Global Alliance. And we actively work together with our international partners, both with the UN Commission, the UN Human Rights Council, because we understand that all international organizations are a tool to convey Ukraine's voice worldwide and an opportunity to keep focus on the Ukrainian issues. We are very open, not just to learning from the experience of other countries, which we are very thankful for to everyone, because this experience helps us to develop our practices better. But we are also ready to share our experience today. The Center of Survivor Help, the platform for helping survivors, which was initiated by the Vice Prime Minister, the format of consulting survivors, and other things that already exist in Ukraine today. They are quite new for the global community. And it would be great if we could also hear about them. Ukraine as a country expressed its interest in presiding over the organization 2025, and we are also going to file this intention officially, because we understand that we already have experience that can help other countries combat this phenomenon better and help survivors better. As for your question about the initiative of the pilot project to provide urgent reparations to survivors, all have outlined the general framework and our first ambitious goals to provide such compensations to 40 affected women and men in March, and to be able to provide such assistance to 500 survivors by the end of the year. Without repeating what has already been said about the supervisory board, where both Elena and I are present, and Ludmila as well, about the identification committee headed by Alexandra Khamalenko from the National Service, consisting of survivors and NGO representatives. We also have the appeal commission. The system has been built, but we are going to go forward according to the principle learning by doing, and we are going to act in accordance with what we have learned and what we have already seen in our work. In April, we are going to have a meeting to see what we can do to make this process even better. We are going to continue our consultations with SEMA Network and other organizations. This is going to be very important for us. I would hope that this interaction would engage more survivors. I hope that more survivors will hear about the assistance provided to them by the government, by NGOs. And today we have this unique experience when this project is being implemented with active involvement of the government, which unfortunately mostly did not happen in other countries. So I really wish all the participants of this project, especially the survivors, that it be really successful and we can extend it and use it as a model that will be effective even after the pilot phase is complete. And my last words for now is that our goals are always very ambitious. This is just a challenge and the demand of time. We have such unforeseen and unexpected challenges facing us that we have to respond very quickly. We have to find all the power to use the experience and resources of international organizations and national NGOs. I think today's event is also an illustration that partnerships are key. Leadership is key, and today Olga Stefanishina and the First Lady showed that this leadership exists, leadership at the national level. And for me, the Global Alliance is an example of leadership at the international level. Thank you. Thank you, Katarina. Particularly, thank you for your personal loyalty to this cause. And now we are moving forward to our next speaker. I am very upset that we only see Esther on the screen, but I do hope that in the near future we will see you live in Ukraine again. She does visit us a lot, which we are very thankful for. Esther is the Executive Director of Global Survivors Fund.
Thank you, Esther, that you are with us, and you and a number of other respected organizations are non-governmental members of the Global Alliance. And please tell us how you, as non-governmental participant and member, see the effects of cooperation inside and within the Global Alliance, and how it affects the improvement of the reparation practices for survivors of sexual violence in conflict. And of course, if you have time and want to add something on pilot project, which we started together in close cooperation with your organization, we are more than happy to hear. But taking this opportunity, I want to say thank you for your courage to start this unique project with us, with the government, with Katerina Levchenko, Olga Stefanishina. I think that we can make history and very good history. So Esther, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you so much, Olena. Thank you for also starting with a shimmer of hope. I also think that we can really have an impact together at a global level. And I want to thank you for inviting me to the panel. I'm so sorry that I couldn't be there this time in person. I would have really wanted to be there with all of you. So thank you again. Well, first, perhaps on the alliance. It was already said by Ms. Levchenko and by Lord Ahmed, and I believe it's, in addition to being a platform for coordination and also, of course, a catalyst for action, hopefully, because it's still early stages. For me, the Alliance is also really the beginning, potentially, of a joint international outcry when it comes to conflict-related sexual violence. That is something that's been really missing so far. So it gives me hope. I also, like Ms. Levchenko, think that the conference today really helps us actually understand that importance of the cooperation that is now gradually coming to fruition among the Alliance members. The Alliance is really a platform that brings together, like it was said, countries, and that is countries that are affected by conflict, but also countries that are at peace. very importantly, survivors and civil society organizations. And it's really that they are working jointly to tackle the many, many issues related to conflict-related sexual violence. And it's really that unitedness, that focus that is unique. In our experience at the Global Survivors Fund, it is really when survivors, when governments and civil society actors come together that these significant strides can be made, like we're seeing in Ukraine. So what the Alliance is actually doing at a global level, we try to do that at a national level. We try to help sort of create that ecosystem that is necessary to make reparation a reality. And we've seen that today, we've learned that today, that it is really that ecosystem that's quite flourishing right now in Ukraine, despite the really harsh realities that a country still under attack faces. So that, in my view, is truly groundbreaking, and we really wish for that example to gain traction through the Alliance and really serve as an example to other countries. Bringing it back to the pilot project, if you allow me, indeed, Olena, a couple of words on that. I really think the pilot project is a testament to that true multi-stakeholder collaboration. And with that, I really want to thank the Deputy Prime Minister, but also Government Commissioner Levchenko, because it's women like yourselves, as well as First Lady Ms. Zelenska, that provide the inspiration for this project, but also really that drive the agenda forward with survivors. Katrina, I remember that we met in April 2022 in Kyiv. That's now almost 2 years ago. And you had asked us to think along about this question: how can we be there for survivors right now? And that is when we spoke about the opportunity, but also the value of interim reparation. You picked that up immediately, and since then I think you've been really firm in your commitment, not only to make it a reality, but also in making sure that survivors' voices are heard in this process. And that's really a point that I would like to emphasize, that it is really central to our work, but also what's happening right now with the project in Ukraine is that co-creation with survivors. Every decision, every action needs to be really carefully crafted with survivors, because it's really their experience, their lived experience, that informs all of the work. With that, it's really that process, right? It's the process that counts in reparation, not just the measures. It's not about delivery of aid to beneficiaries, not at all. It's not about that top down. It's really about right holders claiming their right. And we often hear actually from survivors in Ukraine, but also in other countries, that it's not only the what they receive, but particularly how they receive it. That can really have an impact, the way they are treated in the sense of justice and repair, if you like. So claiming that right, that is really what survivors in Ukraine have been doing since 2014 and beyond. And they're still doing it for themselves, for other survivors, for survivors that are still in captivity, and the survivors that unfortunately may yet to become. The implementation of the project is now to start, and I really think it is a first time in history that survivors will have access to interim reparation. There are relevant practices in other countries, but no other government has set up an urgent interim reparation program as the government of Ukraine is doing. So like Ms. Levchenko said, we are learning by doing, we're building good practice, hopefully, on how to do a survivor-centered registration process, on data collection and the preservation of data. Of course, data that protects confidentiality. It's going to give us tremendous insights in what has happened to survivors, when, how, committed by who. And we hope, actually, if we're talking about being ambitious, that this project really will provide the know-how for other and future remedies in Ukraine, but also elsewhere in the world. It's a relatively small project, but we do move forward, hopefully scaling it up and linking it to other remedies at the national and international level. I think there is a really vision out there, linking it to the prosecutor's work, to the national reparation program, and of course the international registry of damages in Ukraine. So together we can work, I think, in making that vision a reality. And then just a final note, like I said, relatively small project, although I don't think talking about 500 survivors is actually using the term small is not correct. Unfortunately, we believe it's a tip of the iceberg. Some counts actually reach potentially up to 7,000 survivors. So there is a need for scaling this up. We received support from France and from Belgium for this important work. But of course, we really hope that others will join this. We cannot stop at 500. And then finally, I hope that in a year from now, we can start hearing really from survivors whose lives have often been completely destroyed, how the urgent interim reparation has helped them rebuild that life. I think it's feasible, and it's nowhere more feasible than in Ukraine. Thank you very much.
Дякуємо, Естер. Дякуємо. І дякуємо, що робимо цю...
Thank you, Esther. Thank you for creating history together with us. And I am also very thankful and very respectful towards our next speaker. We are speaking about Global Alliance today. We're speaking about urgent reparations. But we are also speaking about the reparation policy overall. And a big part of this is the issue of justice, the issue of getting justice in the judicial manner. But an important thing that we mentioned today over and over is the focus on the survivor, focusing on those who have been through this really complex experience. And today we have with us Lyudmila Husseinova. I will not exaggerate when I say she's the voice of survivors. She is also among people who went through these horrible experiences in her own life, and she has been able to dedicate her life to those who survived it and who are now in captivity to this day, and who are going through torture and sexual violence by the aggressor. Lyudmila is the civic journalist, director of SEMA Ukraine NGO. We would like to hear from you. How do you see this role of survivors in the work of the Global Alliance? You are still key stakeholders of this process. What would you like the Global Alliance to focus on, and what goals and tasks would you envision for this quite recent alliance for the future, since it has already partly proven its effectiveness? Please.
So first of all, I want to say that I'm not the only voice. I'm so happy that we are at least 50 other voices, at least in our organization. Some of the attendees mentioned before, and it's a very powerful voice, a collective voice that speaks on behalf of those who, for some reason, cannot speak their voice, those who are still in occupied territories or in captivity. When you asked me about the alliance and our work, we've been showcasing for half this day what we can do together when we really join in our effort, the civil society, the authorities, the non-governmental organizations, when we genuinely try and help each other. Because I think if we help the state fight these terrible crimes, then that's our input, that's our investment in our teamwork, which is fighting off the Russian aggressors. And I think what we can get, that's the first thing we think about. But I want not only get something, but do something and bring something as my input, something like we've been doing from 2014, helping others, rescuing others, sometimes paying the most terrible price, the price of life, and sometimes no less difficult price of freedom. And just as Larissa mentioned, that there are no victims here, You see, there are strong women here. How strong they are, even having survived the terrible ordeals. They're still very strong, and they're full of desire to help others. What can we do? We will continue, and we will continue to raise our voices and let other voices be raised. Those who are now silent about these terrible crimes that Russian occupiers are doing here. What else can we do? We can help each other, we can help our nation, and we are doing quite a lot to implement this pilot project in the interim reparations, etc. As Christian said, that's not reparations per se, it's an assistance. And we also see our special role in being the voice of the state itself, of our nation, to spread the word, to communicate to people why this pilot project is important, why is it good, and why we have to do it, and hope that alliance work will prevent the pilot project from disappearing and just being over. It has to continue. It has to grow into law. It should be written into law, and we have to understand that this work is not only these 500 people are eligible, so there's no this understanding that 500 are the chosen ones and the rest are not. No, everyone who has had the troubles of living through this have to receive that assistance. But it's not only about money. And justice is another thing that we try to restore aside from reparations. And this is where I have great hopes for international alliance, because I want the criminals that did all this to not have, free range, wandering the world, living their best life. Because I've been talking to investigators. In my case, investigator says, well, I cannot submit the restraining order or arrest to this criminal who has been identified as a sex offender and violent sex offender or war criminal. They're helpless, and so I hope for alliance very much. And so as Esther said, this is protection for those who are still in captivity. I thank the Esthers for helping the civilian ladies and girls, and because no humanitarian mission is allowed to them. They don't have any medical assistance. They have no protection, and even we don't hear and see them. So I want Ukraine to be presiding country in alliance meetings, because the experience we've accumulated, that we keep accumulating unfortunately every day, this experience has to be known all over the world. We absolutely have to share it. We absolutely have to make the world understand and see and hear it. And I wanted to also say that it's great that this platform is there. And I think what else we need coverage in society. We need coverage that, well, look, people, there's this alliance. Myself, I have learned about it just not long time ago. We talk so much about people who were affected by these crimes or survived these crimes, And there are people who are afraid, who are reluctant to talk about it. So these people have to know that they are not alone, they are protected, and this work is ongoing and it's not going to stop. Yeah, and it's about courage of everyone who dares to speak, who has gone through this experience. You're right, a pilot project is an urgent reparations. By no way these urgent reparations can play the role of true, genuine reparations that should include justice restored as well. And it's a huge number of commitment that not only Ukraine, but the whole of civilized world, or who still believes themselves as civilized world, the attention and the duty to them. So I want to talk to Kintai Sillinger, who is the senior coordinator in issues of gender-based violence or violence against children in the International Criminal Court as a prosecution officer.
Really, thank you and all your team, huge office on the ground in Ukraine. For us, that's an evidence of the serious support and collaboration with Ukraine, and serious also intentions of the criminal court, International Criminal Court, to prosecute all the war crimes which we have on the ground connecting to the Russian aggression in Ukraine. But today we are talking about sexual violence in conflict, and of course, first of all, I would like to tell us a little bit about perspectives and challenges of prosecution and investigation of such crimes in war. And how do you see this cooperation within the alliance, within the non-governmental and governmental, of course, actors for seeking justice and, of course, bringing perpetrators to the court? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me. Great. And thank you for having the office join in this important meeting. It's been very nice to see some of you that I've worked with in the past, actually. So I'm happy that we are involved in this. So I think just for the first part of your question, I mean, the challenges to investigating and prosecuting conflict-related sexual violence, some are very common and universal challenges. I can't think of a conflict in any part of the world where stigma is not a barrier to survivors coming forward. I can't think of a situation on the planet where the justice system works perfectly and efficiently and is perfectly trauma-informed and survivor-centered. So I think these are some very common challenges in any of the situations where I've worked and where the office is active. There may also be some very unique challenges in any context, and unique challenges for any particular profile of survivor. Right? It's difficult for almost anyone to come forward, but there may be specific individual or community or structural barriers that keep people from reporting what happened to them, which of course makes it difficult to develop those cases. I won't go, we have such limited time, so I won't go into some of the barriers that I imagine are the case here in Ukraine. I think you probably know those barriers as well or better than I do. But maybe I'll focus on the question of the international alliance that everyone has been discussing. And like in any other situation of cooperation, I think that every member of an alliance has something unique to offer. And as you mentioned, we do have a team here on the ground that is doing the investigative work. I want to take it back a little bit to what we at headquarters might be able to offer in the alliance. So some of you might know that at the Assembly of States Parties, which is an annual meeting of the member states of the International Criminal Court, last year in December, we launched 2 new policies that I think are very relevant to this question. I had the honor of leading in the development of one of them and supporting in the development of the other. The first policy is the policy on gender-based crimes, and the second was a policy on children. And these are revisions of former policies we had from several years ago. And I just wanted to highlight them because this is one of the offerings that we wanted to make available to our national colleagues here in Ukraine. These new policies are very specific about the importance of taking a survivor-centered and trauma-informed approach to everything that we do, from the way we look at a situation, even on paper, from the open source material in the beginning, to how we start and plan our investigations, to how we sit with somebody and interview them, to how we analyze all the material we have, to how we walk through the courtroom procedure, all of this. So I think if the policy is of use to our national colleagues here, we'd be very happy to share it. There's a lot in there that might be interesting for you. So for example, in addition to the survivor-centered and trauma-informed approaches, we also have guidance on how to think intersectionally about gender-based crimes committed in an armed conflict. We also have ideas about charging strategies, which of course will be different based on the criminal code here in Ukraine. But how do we, at least with the legal framework we have, think broadly? Rape is not the only act of gender-based crimes that happens in these contexts, right? We have other forms of sexualized torture. Maybe we have forced nudity. Maybe we have other types of degrading or humiliating treatment that are done on the basis of gender or might have gendered impacts. We are trying to widen the aperture of how we understand gender-based crimes at the Office of the Prosecutor so that we're thinking about a wide range of harms that might be gendered in their motive, in their form, or in their impact, to make sure that we gather all of this and that we understand how different people experience these crimes. So I think that's one thing that might be useful in the policy on gender-based crimes. Another thing that might be helpful too is the reminder to ourselves, and maybe it's useful for you, is to contextualize conflict-related sexual violence. It often doesn't happen on its own. Many survivors experience this, but in conjunction with other violations. Maybe they're forced to witness the beating of their family member, or maybe in other contexts, they're displaced from their homes and suffer pillage. So there's so many crimes, and I think we often have to remind ourselves to not just focus on the sexual act someone has suffered, but to let them tell their full story, and maybe the full story of their family members or other people in their community, so that they feel they've had a chance to share everything, and then we can contextualize this one act among the patterns that happen at the individual and community level. I'll mention quickly also the policy on children. As you know, our first arrest warrant focuses on the issue of children. I promise you the investigation's ongoing, and this is not the only arrest warrant that we will issue. But we realize that among international tribunals, and maybe in your domestic system, there has been some hesitation to interview children directly, right? Because of our risk. Maybe they're too vulnerable. Sometimes we assume they're just not reliable. We're trying to train ourselves to develop our capacity to engage children in an ethical and safe way, because they have the right to participation in these processes, but we have to find a way to do it safely and ethically. So this is the heart of the new policy on children, which might also be useful to you. I think that, like the other members of the Alliance, this is one of the things that we can offer in the spirit of positive complementarity that is required of us by the Rome Statute. If there are things that we are producing for ourselves, whether it's our policies or our operational tools, our practice guidance that you might be interested in, please let us know, because some things we just can't share because they're so internal, but there are many things that we can share, and my team and I would be very happy. We're always happy to come to Ukraine and support our local office here and reach out to you. And for the investigators and the prosecutors that I've worked with in the past, it's really nice to see you, and I really hope that we can stay in touch and see how your work has progressed since the last time we sat together. And then the last thing that I would say is that, you know, recently, there are a couple other tools that we've developed that might be useful. We have guidelines for civil society organizations that want to gather evidence and share with International Criminal Court, so that might be of interest to you. We're also developing the policy on complementarity and cooperation, which might be useful. That comes out any day now. And then in the coming year, we'll be developing a handbook on trauma-informed approaches to investigation and prosecution of international crimes, which might also be useful. So I just mentioned those. Please let me know if you'd be interested in accessing them in the future. The last thing I would say is that the International Alliance is so rich that I think it's one of its main potentials will hopefully be to enhance the cooperation, because I think we're still, a year after a conversation from last spring, it still seems like there is need for coordination. There's still many things happening that could be centralized a little bit more. And perhaps it's even as simple as those entities that are providing training on these issues. Is there a way to collect the training materials or the curriculum or the tools that they're using just to put in one place so we can see what's happening in all the different programs, to make sure that if we can't harmonize them, at least we can understand what's happening in other parts of Ukraine and other parts of the system. Because I think that will be very important, I think, as you move forward at the national level. So thank you very much for listening, and I'm glad to be back with you all. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Kim, for your inputs. And anyway, we know that it's very difficult, but we hope that one day we can hear about the possibility to have the case on sexual violence in conflict in the International Criminal Court. I think it's important not just for justice, but also for prevention in the future such cruel cases. Thank you so much for your participation. And вибачте, будь ласка, колеги.
Right, so we're moving forward. We're moving to our next intervention, and the next speaker is Dominic Vidal-Plaza, Senior Program Manager of Holistic Assistance in Denis Mukwege Foundation. So at this stage, I would like to address a question to you. The translation is going, so.
I'm just switching, you know, from one to the other. And sorry, colleagues, you also need to switch. So, Dominique, also your foundation is one of the non-governmental participants and members of the Alliance. And since the first days when the first information about sexual violence in conflict just appeared in Ukraine, you've been in such a great help immediately in Ukraine. And since that, we have very good cooperation and coordination and many important projects for the survivors. But now, especially when we heard now from Kim this recommendation of more close cooperation and enhance this cooperation between different parts of Alliance, and you are also part of the holistic support, which is now this very modern, fashionable term, holistic. But taking into account this one-year practice working with Alliance, and that you are here also building on this, how would you suggest to maybe plan better, coordinate better, or maybe everything is okay, but how could you suggest the further steps of developments of the Alliance, and how do you see your experience as non-governmental organization working inside? Thank you.
Thank you, Elena. Many thoughts in response to those many questions, but I would like to start maybe with introducing who the Mukwege Foundation is. I was just outside and realized, so actually many people don't know what Mukwege Foundation is, and I will just be very brief in saying that first and foremost, Mukwege Foundation is a survivor-centered organization. We believe in 3 key strategies for change. The first being that survivors of conflict-related sexual violence have a right to have access to holistic care, meaning medical, psychological, legal, and socioeconomic forms of support. The second strategy for change that we believe in is supporting the voices of survivors. And as part of this, we work with the Global Network of Survivors of Conflict-Related Sexual Violence, CEMA, and we've been honored to work alongside CEMA Ukraine since late 2018, actually. And the third strategy that we believe in is supporting access to justice and accountability. These three key strategies for change have formed the basis of our participation in the PSVI Alliance. Last year, we launched the guidebook on state obligations related to conflict-related sexual violence, which aims to present as well a holistic approach and explain what states' key obligations are to prevent, mitigate, and respond to conflict-related sexual violence under four main categories: prevention, justice and accountability, response, and reparations. Just recently in December, I personally was very honored to be in Bogota when Colombia took on the presidency of the PSVI Alliance. We sat together with probably close to 100 survivors of conflict-related sexual violence who had come from all over the country to see Colombia assume this presidency. And when I asked them, for them, what did the alliance mean and what did that opportunity mean for them in Colombia, they all said the same thing, which is that they were looking forward to action. They were looking forward to seeing the alliance become a catalyst for meaningful change in their lives. They wanted to see change in terms of access to holistic care, access to reparations, and a guarantee of non-repetition of sexual violence. I think a lot about that today, right now, policy versus action, actually. And I think ultimately this is what Mukwege Foundation tries to advocate for within the Alliance, is listening to survivors' voices and ensuring that the discussions that we have in these policy spheres, they create the changes in reality that survivors want to see. In terms of cooperation and what makes for good cooperation, I want to use this as a key example and our experience so far in Ukraine. Like Esther mentioned, in April 2022, we were here together, a joint team of Mukwege Foundation and Global Survivors Fund. Thank you to the invitation of the Office of the Deputy Prime Minister and also of the Commissioner of Gender Equality Policy, Katerina Levchenko. And I still think about it quite a lot, actually, that it was for me the first time that I really saw a state take such meaningful, concrete action to ensuring a holistic response to conflict-related sexual violence in such a timely way. And this, I think, is really one of the key elements to ensuring change for the lives of survivors of conflict-related sexual violence, is political will. And political will that does not stop at documents or policies or even conferences, but that extends into action. And so far, what I have been honored to see in Ukraine, and I think not just me personally, but Mukwege Foundation and all of our partners, many of whom are in this room, is that action. And to see that political will has transformed into, how can I say, into significant change into how survivors of conflict-related sexual violence are seen in Ukraine. I'm honored today to be sitting in a panel together with Ludmila and to see many recognizable faces in this room. This, how can I say, political will, we saw manifested in the creation of the framework agreement between Ukraine and the United Nations and the interagency working group that has been charged with the implementation of that framework agreement. But I have to say that there are many framework agreements and implementation plans that exist worldwide, and they stay as that. They stay as paper in capital cities, and survivors in rural communities or even outside of main cities, they don't really perhaps even know what that paper might say. They don't get access to what the policies talk about. And over the last 2 years, our team here in Ukraine has been quite honored to work alongside regional actors, national actors, civil society groups, CEMA Ukraine members, members of the National Social Services, the High School of Public Governance, Ministry of Health, Free Legal Aid, civil society groups like YourFem, all of you in the room, to implement what the policy documents talk about, whether they be on the international level at the Alliance or on the national level here in Kyiv. And that has been, I think, quite, for me, a marked if I can pinpoint an element that is key to ensuring access to holistic care for survivors of conflict-related sexual violence, and what makes for good multi-level cooperation, it's this. It's to make sure that political will transforms into action. And to get there, you need commitment. And that commitment we've seen come from individuals, such as Ms. Levchenko here, but also individual activists within government agencies, within civil society groups, and of course the individual commitment and collective commitments of survivors, be them members of CIMA Ukraine, members of male survivor networks, or other civil society groups. I mention a lot the difference between policy and reality because it's something that we at Mukwege Foundation, and especially in terms of our work on holistic care, see quite a lot. I was just moderating a panel in cluster 3 where someone mentioned what you see on the website doesn't correspond to reality. And that is often the case, actually. In April 2022, we sat, members of our team, together with members of CIMA Ukraine, in a shelter during an air alarm, discussing conflict-related sexual violence. And we asked survivors at that moment, what is it that you would want? What is it that you would want to hear from your states, actually? What would make a change for you? And they said to us that at the time, what they really wished for was to be acknowledged. For the state to acknowledge that what had happened to them was a crime, that they were not at fault, that they had a right to access to care, and that there would be a guarantee of non-repetition. There was a sentiment at that time of feeling unrecognized, perhaps, or feeling that there were no services that were specialized enough for survivors of CRSV. And I would be remiss to let this opportunity go by without marking this moment right now, the fact that we sit in a conference that is purely about survivors of conflict-related sexual violence, where survivors co-moderate, they are within panels, they're also sharing their experiences, and that change has happened in just 2 short years, actually, less than a year and a half, perhaps, and how powerful that is, and what a strong message that sends. So in that regard, I think Ukraine is creating quite an important example for other members of the PSVI Alliance, demonstrating what it actually takes to roll out a holistic and survivor-centered response to conflict-related sexual violence. It's not just enough to talk about it on the paper, but actually, how do you make that happen in practice? As Mukwege Foundation, we work with networks of survivors and individual survivors to ensure that they have the skills, the capacities, the competencies, and the opportunities to be able to participate in the decisions and the processes that affect them, related to the principle of the global survivor movement, which is something you've heard a lot today, nothing about us without us. What I have seen right now in Ukraine actually is, outside of perhaps these conferences and meetings, is how seriously different actors have taken that to heart. And you mentioned, that survivor-centered and holistic is becoming a bit of a buzzword, and it wasn't always that way. 10, 15 years ago, these words were very foreign. No one knew what that meant, survivor-centered, holistic. And now it's on the tip of everyone's tongue. And more importantly than it just being a buzzword, we see it taking shape. We see it taking action. Survivors are speaking out. And as they continuously say and have said sometimes today, they are experts within their own rights. They know best their own needs. They know best how to advise us on how to respond. I'm completely ignoring my script right now, but I wanted to touch on all of these things as the questions were so broad. You asked, I guess, what does it take how does cooperation contribute to more effective reparations? But I want to speak broadly about holistic care, including access to reparations. Mukwege Foundation bases itself on the Ponzi model and philosophy of care, which is what we call a holistic one-stop center model of care. And we often use the imagery of the chair, a 3-legged chair, to demonstrate the importance of this collaboration and cooperation across sectors, not just on the political level, but on the very practical and service provision level. I've been in countries and in rooms where doctors don't know what nurses do with regard to conflict-related sexual violence, or doctors prepare medical certificates that judges and lawyers don't know how to read, for example, or where survivors themselves don't really know that they have access to all of these forms of care, and how would they get there in the first place? And what we have seen and what we firmly believe and what we've been working on here in Ukraine is that this multi-sectoral, organic form of cooperation and collaboration is essential, actually, to ensuring survivor-centered and holistic care. It's not enough for services to be available, but they must intersect. They must collaborate very closely. Survivors should know what they have access to and how to navigate them. And that process can be very difficult for survivors, even in contexts where services exist, and they need to be accompanied for that. I will just end with saying that I think a final message from us is that we really want to applaud the efforts of Ukraine and encourage you to share this example with other members of the alliance so that you can actually demonstrate what it takes to be survivor-centered and holistic in a response to CRSV. The world is waiting for this type of advice and expertise. Thank you.
Thank you, Dominique. Thank you. Ну і колеги, у нас волею долі.
Well, dear colleagues, I guess it's a fate, because we had this very symbolic event, because representatives of Democratic Republic of Congo had to be present at the very beginning of our panel. However, unfortunately, they had technical problems. So now Chantal Yelomalop joined us, Special Advisor of the President of Democratic Republic of Congo and advisor on combating violence against women and children. And I think it's very symbolic that after Dr. Mukweg's foundation, now we have representatives from Democratic Republic of Congo.
Is yours. We are happy to listen to you here in Ukraine, please.
Excellency, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, yes.
That's great. Hi, everybody. Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, all protocol observed. First of all, I would like to thank the organizer of the event. On behalf of the Office of the Head of State of the Democratic Republic of Congo, Excellency Mr. Felix Antoine Tshisekedi Chilombo. It is a pleasure to participate at this roundtable regarding the partnership of members of the International Alliance for the Prevention of Sexual Violence in Conflict Zone and multilateral approach to implement effective reparation measures for survivors of violence sexual in Kyiv, in Ukraine. I did all I can do to be present in Kyiv, in Ukraine, but it didn't work. But for the next time, I will be there and be with you guys and participate on different events with you and support what happened to Kyiv, because what's going on in Kyiv is kind of the same what's going on in DRC Congo. So I just want to remind all of you that more than 3 decades ago, the Republic Democratic of Congo, my country,
Maybe you can ask your colleagues to switch off other online devices if you have any connections. Thank you.
I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Connection. Je sais pas si je sais. Hello?
Yes. We can hear you, but I think you have one more device, and that's why you have this phonics in the room.
Okay, Tenisa. I'm sorry.
Вибачте, будь ласка. Так, я так розумію, що
As far as I understand, now we are still waiting, but due to technical issues, if possible, we will switch to our next speaker, and then one more time, we will try to listen to our colleagues from DRC. So I would like to invite the floor.
Multifaceted wars. From this atrocity, more than 500,000 victims of sexual and gender-based violence has been identified, including children and girls who lost their life. Only a few of them were able to be recovered from social reintegration. We have recorded cases of women buried alive in the province of Kyiv due to the fragile security context. It should be mentioned that those efforts to support crime and actors of sexual and gender-based violence has been strongly carried out, and I can mention among of these efforts, like the promulgation of law in the fight against sexual and gender-based violence, the promulgation of law on the fight against domestic violence, the promulgation of the law on the protection of human rights defenders, the promulgation of law on the free case to justice for victims of sexual violence, the promulgation of the law ratifying the protocol of the African Charter on Human Rights relating to the rights of women in Africa, known as the Maputo Protocol, the revision of the Family Code, the training of frontline actors, including magistrates, soldiers, and other categories on the prevention of sexual violence. However, in areas affected by conflict, there was certainly a lack of magistrates due to the fragile security context, hence the needs for international justice to support the Congolese state in the effort to effectively combat conflict relating sexual violence. Besides all of this, it should be remembered that the Democratic Republic of Congo has been able to put in place mechanisms to combat sexual and gender-based, like at the grassroots level, community early warning have been installed. The creation of integrated multi-sectoral sector service center, CICM, for the care of survivors of gender-based violence. The free line, we calling that the 122 call center, allowing victims to contact people in the event of abuse for assistance and getting free holistic care. The establishment of National Fund for Reparation for Victims of Sexual Violence, calling FONAREV, which has the following goals. One is to support victims by providing basic social services, to create training center for victims, to study and examine the type of trauma experienced by victims, to establish a database of cases of victims of violence, to compensate victims of sexual violence and providing reparation, to provide holistic support to the victims. The major challenge in the fight against sexual violence in Democratic Republic of Congo are the persistence of repetitive armed conflicts, which hiding the development of women, especially those living in rural areas occupied by army groups. The insufficiency of financial, logistical, and material resources to cover the needs of victims through the national territory. The insufficiency knowledge of rights by the victims themselves. The administrative burden at the level of the courts and tribunals to deliver justice. The establishment of international justice and compassionate mechanisms will be one of the best options to take place, to eradicate the crime committed by the actor of sexual violence and prosecute them whenever they go. Because at the present, the issue has become transnational and requires a combined effort of the entire community, both national and international, to end this phenomenon which is decimate thousands of lives of women and girls. Before closing my intervention, let me thank the state of Ukraine through the International Alliance for the Prevention of Sexual Violence in Conflict for associating the Democratic Republic of Congo in the round table filled with experiences. We will once again be happy to participate in other meetings to future by sharing the events as well as the progress made in the prevention and fight against sexual violence in time and the conflict zone in the same time. So I would like to say thank to everybody. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, dear Chantal. Thank you for your participation. І ми рухаємося далі.
And we are moving forward. And our next speaker is from Japan, Mr. Yasumasa Hajima, Deputy Head of Mission in Japan Embassy to Ukraine.
You, of course, want to tell thank you to Japan because you are a reliable, constant partner of Ukraine with the tremendous support, especially in the hard times. And thank you for the last announcement about almost 14 billion support for this year. But at the same time, you are part of the alliance, you are a member state which participate in the alliance, and I give you the floor to announce the official address from your state. Thank you.
Thank you, Sotonik-san. Distinguished colleagues and guests. Let me start by expressing Japan's sincere appreciation to the United Kingdom as a chair and Ukraine as a vice chair of the International Alliance on Preventing Sexual Violence in Conflict for holding this event at the time of difficulties and challenges. Sexual violence in conflict is a serious crime that threatens the peace and the security of the international community. To prevent such violence, it is critical to punish perpetrators and end the culture of impunity by strengthening justice systems. Towards this end, the adoption of the UN General Assembly resolution entitled International Cooperation for Access to Justice, Remedies, and Assistance for Survivors of Sexual Violence, which was tabled by Sierra Leone and co-facilitated by Japan in September 2022, serves as a milestone. It is the first ever General Assembly resolution solely devoted to the survivors of sexual violence, and it emphasizes the importance of cooperation while primarily strengthening domestic access to justice for all victims of sexual violence. The International Criminal Court also plays an important role in fighting against impunity, building on cooperative relations with the ICC. Japan, the largest financial contributor, remains committed to supporting the operation of the court, including through sending a Japanese judge and dispatching prosecutors. Furthermore, Japan has supported the work of the UN Office of the Special Representative of the Secretary General on sexual violence in conflict since 2014, and through the team of experts has provided support for strengthening justice to prosecute perpetrators in Africa and the Middle East. In addition to enhancing justice systems and cooperation, it is of utmost importance to center the survivors who are suffering now and provide prompt and comprehensive support for them. Japan has contributed a total of 8 million euros from 2020 to 2023 to the Global Fund for Survivors of Conflict-Related Sexual Violence, and actively participated in the fund's management and its projects as a member of the board of directors of the fund. The fund has worked in conflict-affected areas such as Democratic Republic of Congo, Iraq, and here in Ukraine to support survivors, and has conducted country surveys in more than 20 countries on the status of reparation for survivors on conflict-related sexual violence, among other efforts to support survivors. Furthermore, Japan has regularly provided voluntary contribution to the ICC Trust Fund for victims and has been providing medical assistance to survivors and other support for the economic independence through UN Women and UNFPA in many countries. Let me touch upon the Japan-Ukraine Conference for Promotion of Economic Growth and Reconstruction, which was held in Tokyo on 19th last month. Minister for Foreign Affairs of Japan, Kamikawa Yoko, also hosted a session on women, peace, and security, which was participated by Ms. Yulia Sviridenko, First Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Economy of Ukraine, through a video message, and other female leaders of the government of Ukraine, entrepreneurs, as well as a civil society organization. We would like to express Japan's appreciation for the fruitful discussion in this session. Japan will implement concrete initiatives for all the phases of recovery and the reconstruction of the Ukraine under the slogan of WPS in action, while we are providing support for urgent needs on the ground, such as medical care, shelter, and response to gender-based violence. We also facilitate women's participation and leadership as agency of recovery of the nation and invest in future leaders through education. In closing, as a member of the Alliance, Japan will continue to partner with the Alliance members as well as multilateral forums to further the global efforts to end conflict-related sexual violence and provide comprehensive support for survivors. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ejima. Дякую, колеги.
Thank you, colleagues. Apologies that we delayed this a little bit, but actually, at one point, we will remember this. There were several important historic moments for the alliance as well, because first, we have representatives of several countries that play an important role in the alliance. Here on the stage with us, we had a speaker from DRC, those who understand a little bit the challenges that are faced by the DRC definitely understands how unprecedented it is that we have the speaker with us today. Dr. Mukwege is actually from DRC himself, and the tragedy that took place there is what was the catalyst for creation of Dr. Mukwege's foundation and all those systems. And that's not the only thing. I think we heard highly important points. There is a whole number of things that they are ready to share with us. And I think not only Ukraine, but all countries that are part of the alliance should join this discussion to understand how we can exchange this experience in the most effective way. And in terms of Ukraine, we do have such a unified platform of trainings where we share our experience. I think as the next step, we can think how we can share this experience, not just in Ukraine, but also with all participants of the alliance and everyone who needs this overall. To wrap up, I guess I would use the words of Ludmila Husseinova, who said that this conference and this panel today demonstrates that together we can do something important together. Thank you to all our panelists for this demonstration of our joint capacity. Thank you.